Yo, yo, yo. Welcome back to the Been There, Done That podcast. I am your host, and I go by Ben. As you can see, something new for those of you who might be watching the video version of this podcast. I've got a face cam now. For the video version of this podcast, we are moving up in the world. Here in episode 56. What better episode to choose to start the video podcast than episode 56, which is, by the way, your Lawrence Taylor episode. Maybe the best defensive player in the history of the NFL. And if you think about it, the true inspiration behind the movie The Blind Side, that movie probably doesn't happen without him. You know, Michael Orr probably doesn't even exist without Lawrence Taylor. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I need to do some more research. But shout out to Lawrence Taylor. Shout out it being episode 56. Here's what we're going to talk about today. I want to jump back into the Chiefs versus Browns. Go back to that game, just talk about some of the highlights, some of the things that were going on, and what that means for the Chiefs moving forward based on what happened in the game. I do want to talk about Travis Hunter winning the Heisman. Those of you who listened to last week, you probably already know my thoughts, but I do want to jump back in and talk about the results just a little bit. I want to do some college football playoff predictions, what I think is going to happen here in the next couple of weeks, over the next month, as the college football playoff, the first time the 12-team playoff is taking place, which is pretty exciting. And then I'm going to rank some Christmas characters. I think it's going to be kind of a mix of my own personal favorite, but also I think the most impactful for Christmas in terms of like movie characters. And I'll put you a little ranking list together for that. And then we'll finish, as we always do, with the office quote of the week. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Starting, of course, with the Chiefs versus the Browns. Somehow, this game where the franchise QB gets hurt, the defense forces 6 turnovers, and the team finally wins by multiple possessions. You know, somehow it still feels like there's not actually that much to talk about in a weird way. And at the same time, it's also about as poorly as you can feel walking away from a 14-point victory in the NFL. For a number of reasons. Number one, it still didn't feel like they played great. You know, they won by 14, but it didn't feel like they played all that well. And then, of course, when your franchise quarterback limps off the field, and that's the last time you see him in the game, you don't feel great. But here's the good news, the silver lining for all of this. If this were any other player in the NFL, I'd be super worried. And I would have doubts heading into the postseason. But history tells us we might actually be in better shape now. And let me explain. We've seen Patrick Mahomes carry a team to a Super Bowl with this exact injury. He has some type of bionic ankle superpower where he can just play through injuries that other players can't. Other players need 4 to 6 weeks to recover from this type of injury. And not only does he play, but he seems to almost elevate his game, which is going to be needed when you think about the way he's played this year. He has not been his usual Superman self, and so I think he's going to need a little bit. If that's what it takes for him to get a boost, though, to have a high ankle sprain, if that's what it takes, then more power to you, I guess. Now, I don't know what causes this. I don't know why he gets better when this happens. I don't know if it's like his hurt ankle causes him to be more hyper aware in the pocket, like his pocket presence. Maybe it increases because he knows like, oh, I can't take a hit or I'm in trouble. I don't know if it causes his just mechanics and his throwing motion to improve and to get back to the basics. And he does, again, may not have the choice to be sloppy in the throwing motion or whatever. I'm not totally sure what it is, but we've seen it. Something happens that turns him into a better player when he realistically shouldn't even be playing. And it's kind of amazing to see. And so I'm very interested to see what this looks like moving forward. And the question is now, of course, should he play this week against Houston? Which I'm not a doctor. I'm not here to give you a definite yes or no. But what I do know, high ankle sprains are an injury that you could. I think they say you can usually finish the game. If you have a high ankle sprain, you can probably finish out the rest of the game, which is odd because like you can finish the game, but then you probably going to feel it most the next morning when you wake up, and you're not going to be able to put weight on it, and it's just going to be a lot of pain. The swelling is going to be at its worst the next morning, And so I keep that in mind when I think of the game, and it looked like he may have been trying to get ready to go back in after he got injured. And so on one hand, that's kind of encouraging. It's good. You can tell it's not like a season-ending injury or anything like that. But I wouldn't use that as the barometer, the measure of like, oh, he's going to be back next week because he was ready to go in last week. High ankle sprains are a little different in that sense. And so another point of information of all of this is he was a full participant in practice, or I believe that's what I saw. I think it was on Monday. Said he was a full participant, which is good news. Meaning, so like it sounded like a high ankle sprain, but maybe it wasn't the most severe high ankle sprain. The fact that the next day, and I know Monday, I don't think it's a full padded practice or anything, so it probably just means he was moving around on it and going through walkthroughs the day after the game. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but he was listed as a full participant, which is good news. And so when you get into the potential outcomes when you're looking at playoff scenarios, assuming that Buffalo doesn't lose again, which is likely because they play the Patriots twice and they play the Jets sandwiched in the middle of that, so they have 3 very winnable games. Now, granted, the Jets looked pretty good last week, but those are 3 teams that the Bills should win, 3 games that the Bills should win. This creates an interesting situation for the Chiefs, right? The game versus Houston this week is the most important, as in you win this week and you set yourself up to be like, regardless of what the Bills do, all you have to do is win 2 or one of those last 2 games, which the numbers would suggest the Chiefs can, given it in a 2-week span, to say you got to win one of these games. The Chiefs are probably going to win. It may not be the one we think. It may not be the way we think they're going to do it. But the numbers and the statistics would suggest that they're going to find a way to win the game that they need to win. And so it's kind of created some situations in my mind of like, what's the best way to approach these last few games? Because on the other side of it too, if Buffalo does slip up once, if the Chiefs win this week and Buffalo does happen to slip up at any point, it doesn't even matter. The Chiefs already clinched the 1 seed. And so I actually do have an idea of, I think, what would actually be the most efficient way to approach this. And I think what would be most beneficial for the team long term. Now, I should preface it, I don't think they're going to do what my idea is. And I also should preface, I heard Nick Wright talking about this idea as well, but I think I just have a few different twists on it or different perspectives with it as well. But you know what I would really love to see the Chiefs do? Go all out and win the game this week against Houston. If Mahomes, even if he's not 100%, if he's good enough to play, let him play. Win the game against Houston, and then you have more options moving forward. And I think the next step in that, I would say the game against Pittsburgh, even though you don't have the 1 seed locked up yet, sit everybody. Sit everybody against Pittsburgh on Christmas Day, the Netflix game. And at that point, assuming the Bills keep winning, the risk there, the downside of that is you essentially you put all of your eggs in the basket of being able to beat Denver in week 17. And when you do that, you clinch the 1 seed. And I know that heightens the risk, right? You have this any given Sunday type of thing going on. But hear me out. If the Chiefs were to sit everyone on Christmas, assuming they beat Houston, here's what that would mean. You basically give yourself another bye week, right? You beat Houston this week, then you don't play at all during Christmas week. You have a week off, which you haven't had in, when was the Chiefs? Week 6. So quite a while ago. It's been a while since the Chiefs' actual bye week. And they could desperately use that given all their injuries. Another thing, you likely give Pittsburgh a free win. Like Pittsburgh will most likely beat you if you're sitting your starters, which in turn is going to hurt Baltimore's slim chances of winning their division. And I think it's never a bad thing to kind of stick it to Baltimore too. It could be kind of fun, enjoyable for all the trash talk they do. And at the beginning of the year, Isaiah Likely and if that's their best, watch, that whole situation. It's fun to see Baltimore not win their division either, and they have to fight their way going on the road throughout the entire playoffs. So there's that added element to it. And then another important part of this that I think you can kind of stick it to the NFL for using you as the show pony for the world on Christmas. and these forced games in the middle of the week to play on Christmas, all just to make some extra money. And the thing is, I know the game, even if the Chiefs do sit their starters, the games are going to do great, and the NFL is going to make a lot of money. But I think it would be a great way to just kind of stick it to the NFL a little bit. It's like, oh, you picked this in the offseason because you wanted the world to see Patrick Mahomes on Christmas, and what kind of money that's going to generate for you and for the league. And so if Patrick's not playing, if Travis Kelce's not playing, if maybe even Chris Jones, any of the big name guys aren't playing, it's going to be successful. People are going to watch, but it's going to hurt. I think it's going to hurt. And I think it'd be a fun way to get back at the NFL for this whole forced Christmas thing, these these Christmas games that they've got going on, because the thing is, the Chiefs, the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Texans, they all have this weird 3 games in 10 days thing going on here, where they're all playing on this Saturday, and then they'll play again on Wednesday on Christmas. But it's also not quite the same, because while they all do still have this 3 games in 10 days and then 2 and 4, the Ravens and the Texans both had their bye just a week ago. So they're relatively fresh. They've only played 1 game. So they had their bye week in week 12 and then a game, and now they have the stretch of 3 and 10. The Steelers had their bye week 9. So you have to go back a few more weeks, about a month ago. But the Chiefs, like I mentioned, their bye was in week 6. And so it's been basically 2 months since the Chiefs had their bye. And then they're still being forced here to have this 3 games in 10 days situation here at the end of the year, against 3 very quality opponents. And so, again, I'm still curious, for those of you out there that think the NFL rigs things for the Chiefs. I'm very curious how this is working in your favor. How is this rigged for the Chiefs? I'm just out of curiosity. Someone please let me know in the comments. And so, again, back to this scenario that I've kind of laid out, assuming you go all out and you beat Houston, and then you lose to Pittsburgh because you don't play anyone. You then have your game in Denver after a week off. Your starters are back into a win to clinch the 1 seed type of scenario. And because when you think about it, if you're resting in week 18, plus the 4 extra days after the Christmas game, you're looking at 3.5 weeks between games that matter, right? You'd have the game on Christmas that would matter. And if you win it and you clinch, the next important game you'd play would be the divisional round. So 3.5 weeks is a long time to go, I think, without playing a game. While the Chiefs do need rest and they need a little bit of time to heal and get some guys back, 3.5 weeks, like I said, is a long time to go without playing. And so when I'm looking at long-term, the efficiency, what's the best way to approach that? I think if you have this Denver game as a must win, look at it as you play 1 meaningful game in the midst of this 3.5 weeks, right? And so you beat Houston, you get basically 10 days to kind of rest with this. Look at it like a preseason game against Pittsburgh in the middle. That doesn't really matter. So you have 10 days to rest your key players. You go in, so that's kind of like a mini bye for Andy Reid. Then you go into Denver with you do have to win it. You can't mess around, but you have to win the game. But if you do that, then you have another 13 or 14 days after before your game in the divisional round with whoever you got then. And I think that, in my opinion, is best case scenario. It's basically giving yourself 2 extra buys, but you're not off for 3.5 weeks. That's almost a whole month without having a meaningful game, which I think might be a little too long. So if I could have it exactly the way I want it, I'd say sit against Pittsburgh and put all your eggs in the basket of beating Denver week 18. Again, I don't expect them to do that because it's probably a little too risky. Again, the any given Sunday, anything can happen. But I do think that would be the best thing long term for the team. And then I say all that, it could even just be hey, the Chiefs win this week and then Buffalo has a stinker this week and falls for whatever reason. When they play New England, they actually have a little bit of trouble sometimes randomly with some of their divisional opponents. And so all that being said, it wouldn't shock me either if Buffalo does slip up one of the next 3 games and loses to one, either the Patriots or the Jets or whoever. And at that point, it's just like all you got to do is win one game, and none of that really even matters. And then you're off for like what is basically a month and a half before you play another game. So obviously, a lot of things can still happen, but I would love the Chiefs to be big brain a little bit and just stick it to the NFL and not play on Christmas. I think that'd be fun. So a few other notes from this game. The defense finally, became opportunistic, started to take advantage of some of the mistakes by the defense. 6 turnovers in a game is a lot, even when you're playing against Jameis Winston, who is kind of a turnover machine. But there was also no flip side of that, really. Usually, Jameis Winston, it's like, he threw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns, but also threw 3 interceptions, right? He threw all the picks, but he didn't rack up the yards. He didn't rack up the touchdowns. The only thing the defense did wrong all day was the one broken play where Jerome Ford had the long run for the touchdown. So all in all, like, obviously you can't say the defense couldn't have played any better. 6 turnovers is, it's amazing. And so the defense looked great. I guess the Browns have a good offensive line, and they were able to get to the Chiefs were able to get pressure, which is good. Their weapons aren't all that great. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, when he came in, not great. So the quarterback situation is not what is going to be moving forward, but it was good. And hopefully they were able to get their feet under them a little bit and start to build a little bit more momentum moving forward in terms of finding more turnovers. And because I think that's going to be a big difference. A lot of these games that they're winning by the slimmest of margins, I think it comes down to the fact like they're not really forcing turnovers and not giving themselves any room for error. And that's why it feels so close. But if they could just force a few turnovers here and there, give themselves an extra possession or two, they're gonna be much more comfortable when they win games, which would be nice. It would be great for everybody. Maybe not everybody, as in me. Maybe not the entire NFL, but a few other things. Joe Tooney is, like, in my opinion, I think he's the best left tackle the Chiefs have on the roster, which I don't love to say that. But he held his own against Myles Garrett. He held his own. Didn't have any sacks, and don't know what the whole thing was with him poking his eye. Couldn't even really see what it was. To me, it looked like a normal block. But the run, the problem with that, I guess I should say, the run game kind of suffers when he isn't at guard. I think the Chiefs are at their best, especially in the run game, when Joe Tooney is playing guard. And I think this is all part of the bigger problem of what I view as the clear red flag for the Chiefs right now. I don't know if you can hear in the background, I have the tornado sirens going off. It's the test. They do it every Wednesday at noon. So the sirens are going off right as I'm talking about the red flag. So I don't know if you can hear that or not. I can. But again, back to the Chiefs, the red flag that I see that we've been talking about, that it's not really a secret, is the offensive line, specifically the tackles. And in pass protection and protecting Mahomes. And we saw it this game. Mahomes got beat up and injured, and there's some concern here now. The thing about, like, their offensive line, I mentioned this last week, but that's what has hurt them in the past. That's the one thing that's ever been their Achilles heel in the playoffs, is not being able to protect Patrick Mahomes. If he doesn't have time to throw or do what he does, it creates problems for them. And so I think if the tackle play stays how it is right now, they are much more likely to lose in the playoffs. That being said, hopefully DJ Humphries is able to get back soon, and hopefully he's able to build some rhythm, because their current situation could be problematic. I mean, you guys know me. I'm the biggest, like, everything's going to be fine. It's all going to work out. In Veach we trust. I'm the leader of that team pretty much all the time, but I'm also objective. I tell the truth. I tell like I see it. And if the offensive line is this bad throughout the entire, throughout the whole playoffs, it would not shock me to see the Chiefs slip up, because Mahomes is not able to be Mahomes. And that's what it's all about. It's Mahomes being Mahomes. That's how you win in the playoffs for the Chiefs. And so if you can't be Mahomes, they're not the same team. So all that being said, if I've learned anything from the Chiefs teams of the past, they'll probably turn into the early 2000s Chiefs offensive line, with like Willie Roaf, Brian Waters, Will Shields, all those guys, which is one of the best offensive line units ever. They'll probably turn into that group and not allow a single sack and throughout the entire postseason. And so, fingers crossed. Hopefully that's what happens. and hopefully they find a way. Now, before they get there, they have a gauntlet of pass rush units to get through. Houston, they got this week is second in the league in sacks. They get to the quarterback very well. Then they play TJ Watt on the Steelers, who is like maybe the best defensive player in the NFL right now. He and Myles Garrett both have an argument. Chris Jones actually has an argument too, but most people won't tell you that because he's on the Chiefs. But they play TJ Watt, and then they go play Denver, who is number 1 in the NFL in sacks. Right, so there's not a gimme game left especially when you look at the defensive fronts for all of these teams. There's nothing easy about these last three games. So if they can make it through these last couple of games in the regular season, nothing's going to phase them in the postseason. They're not going to see anything like this again, unless of course they do play one of these teams. But this is as tough as it's going to get in these next 3 games. So, like I said, if they can make it through that, they can make it through anything. And then a few last narrative notes about the Chiefs. I know everyone is obsessed with the Bills right now, talking about they are just unstoppable. Look how many points they're scoring. Josh Allen is the MVP, which he is. Josh Allen should win the MVP. Again, I'm fair. I'm objective. Josh Allen is clearly the MVP right now, even though he's averaging 3 more pass yards per game than Patrick Mahomes. But again, we don't have to talk about that. That can be a separate conversation. But I do believe Josh Allen is the MVP. But again, looking at the narrative of things, everybody loves the Bills. Look at all these points they're scoring. Even though they literally lost last week, right? So it gets annoying. It's like everybody loves the Bills because they've never won anything, and we love their fans. Bills Mafia is awesome. Blah blah blah. Like, we love the Bills, and they're just unstoppable right now. Except they're not. Like, they're red hot right now. They won 1 game in a row. They lost last week. They've allowed 40 plus points in consecutive weeks, right? And so we love talking about Josh Allen and all the great things he's doing, but that's a lot of points to allow for a defense in a 2-week span. And so that concerns me a little bit about the Bills. I'll be honest, I don't know. Because on the flip side, the Chiefs, of course, we know they're winning close games. They're not flashy or exciting. They're not winning games in shootouts like the 2018 team or even 2022 team to an extent. And everybody hates the Chiefs because they win and they keep winning, and they're not winning by enough. It's just it doesn't look good enough to when they do it. And so there's always this the Chiefs are in trouble. They're only winning by close games. But then the Ravens and the Bills both are like, oh, look at all these points they're scoring. But then they lose every third game. It just, it's annoying. I'm used to it by now. This is kind of how it goes. This is the narrative that we see every year. And I feel like history is just repeating itself over and over. I've seen this story told every single year since Mahomes and the Chiefs really became the villains. It's kind of the same story. But last thing about the Chiefs, if I see this graphic one more time, right, you've probably seen it. If you're on social media and you have any sports algorithms coming to you at all, you've probably seen this graphic about how the Chiefs are one of 5 teams to not score over 30 points yet. And they're in there with the Raiders and the Giants, or a couple of the worst teams in the NFL. And I kid you not, I've seen this graphic. It's popping up on my timeline every time I open social media over the last week. And I'm going to lose it. If I see this one more time, I'm going to lose it. Because it is the most cherry-picked stat, the most move the goalpost type of stat I've ever seen. The Chiefs have scored 30 points exactly 2 times. And so we have this statistic of, look at the Chiefs. They haven't scored over 30 at all. They must be bad, like all these other teams that are bad. Yet they're 12-1, and they've scored 30 points twice. And they've not allowed over 30 points either. I think they're one of the few teams in the league that has not allowed over 30 at any point in the season. But you're not going to see that graphic. You're going to see how bad the Chiefs are, how they never score points, all these different things. And so I will say it. Seeing that graphic is driving me up the wall. And if I see it again, I'm going to lose it. So just had to throw that out there. Had to get that off my chest. But moving on now to some college football topics. Number 1, Travis Hunter wins the Heisman. And I did talk about this last week. I want to reiterate some of the things that we talked about just for some of the new listeners who may not have been here. Travis Hunter is an unbelievable player who will have a great NFL career. But let me tell you, Ashton Jeanty was robbed. Okay. And I'm not alone in this. I'm not alone in this thought. I mean, Jeanty won the fan vote, which, by the way, I thought was kind of funny and also kind of awkward. Like, they announced this in the middle of Travis Hunter receiving the actual award during the ceremony, and they just kind of threw it in randomly in the middle, like, oh, by the way, Ashton Jeanty won the fan vote. And everyone's kind of like, yay, congrats, Ashton, way to go. So I thought that was a little weird. But I do appreciate college football fans recognizing who was really more deserving. It was the guy who had the second best running back season in college football history, behind Barry Sanders. And he probably would have already broken the rushing record if he hadn't have sat out. What I believe I saw was like 9 or 10 different quarters this season, because they just been blowing people out. Like, if he wouldn't have sat those quarters out, he's probably already got the rushing record. He's probably close to 3,000 yards already, which is unreal. And he may still get there, depending on how they do in the playoffs. If he has a couple of big games, he could be pushing 3,000 yards this year. And I think it was pretty clear that he was the deserving player, but it came down to how loud is your coach? How flashy is it? How we're giving in. It's becoming a popularity contest. And that's what it was. It turned into a popularity contest. And something I mentioned last week, I do want to bring it back up just for some of the new listeners. I think the same people who claim that LeBron James is just breaking records because of, he never leaves the floor. He just won't ever retire. Of course he's got all the records. He never leaves. It's the same people who think Travis Hunter should be Heisman. And they say he should win it because he doesn't ever leave the field. And I think what we're doing is, we have these snap counting stats, and we're kind of picking and choosing where we want them to work for us, which I'm not a fan of. Not really a fan of that. But it is what it is. Congrats to Travis Hunter. He's going to be a great player in the NFL. And I hope he has a great time in the Alamo Bowl here in a couple weeks. And I hope he has a fun time watching Ashton Jeanty in the playoffs. I bet he had fun watching him in his conference championship. And I hope he enjoys watching him in the playoffs, in the second round of the playoffs, hosting a game in Boise on that beautiful blue field, by the way. Big fan of that field. Looks kind of goofy, sure, but it's kind of iconic at this point. It's just like, it's great. So, yeah. Moving on to another topic in college football. I want to go through the games, the college football bracket predictions. Just go through the games based on how I'm looking at the bracket right now. So I've got the bracket pulled up on my computer, on my notes in front of me, and I have just kind of laid out in front of me. I'm just going to go game by game and just make a prediction. So round 1, Clemson versus Texas. I think Texas wins easily. I think Clemson's just happy to be here. They're not that great. I think Texas wins pretty easily. Tennessee versus Ohio State. On paper, I think Ohio State should win. I think they're more talented, but something about just being a big game and Ryan Day against an SEC team, I think Ohio State doesn't do those very well. So I like Tennessee to go into the shoe and win. Penn State versus SMU. I think SMU is a cool story. It's fun that they got in, but I don't think SMU hasn't really played anyone this year. And I think Penn State is just a bit more experienced, more talented, more ready for this type of moment. So I like Penn State to beat SMU. Indiana versus Notre Dame. I think this is probably the most intriguing of the first round matchup. It's a in-state matchup. Indiana's been one of the most fun stories all year, kind of most improbable. Just a one loss to Ohio State. And that was really the thing is, though, that was really the only good team they played this year, and they got cooked. They just kind of it wasn't really all that competitive. And so for that, I don't think too highly of Notre Dame, honestly. I think they just need to join a conference, and if they don't, it's hard for me to really be bought into them. But I do think Notre Dame wins this one relatively easily. Round 2 would be Texas at Arizona State. I think Texas wins a close one in this one. I think Arizona State is one of the hottest teams in the country right now. Cam Scadaboo is fun. He actually even showed up on some Heisman ballots. And his only thing is, I think the athleticism on Texas, the defense is great, and they're going to find a way to contain that. And I think it's going to be a little too much for Arizona State to overcome. It's a great story, Arizona State is, but it's just not going to be quite enough to handle powerhouse defensive juggernaut Texas. Next game would be Tennessee at Oregon. I think this is a good game. I think there's some fun moments, but I do think I think Oregon pulls away late and finds a way to move on just with the experience. They've got a lot more of it and a little bit more talent. So Oregon moving on. Next game would be Penn State at Boise State. Boise State would win a low-scoring game. I'm actually not sure. I have to double-check the bracket if this is one that would be on their home field or not. I don't know if this is... I think this might be a bowl game. Or, no, would they be hosting? Either way, whatever it is, I still think... well, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about that, I think if it's a neutral site game, I kind of like Penn State a little bit more. But if it is in Boise, I haven't looked at where the games are actually going to be. If it's in Boise... I like Boise to win there on the blue field, and long way to go for Penn State. But if it's like a neutral indoor type of game, I kind of feel like it'd go Penn State's way. But just for the sake of for fun to be like, oh, Boise could win, I'll go with Boise. I'll say Boise's going to win. Boise will beat Penn State. And then fourth matchup of round 2 would be Notre Dame at Georgia. Again, I don't know if it's actually at Georgia or if they're just playing Georgia. I feel like it is. I should look it up. Regardless, this one I don't think matters where the game's played. I think Georgia wins pretty easily. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois at home this year, and I have not been able to get that one out of my mind. I know they have a couple other solid wins, but they have not played a team like Georgia, and I think it's too much for them. The next round 3, the semifinal, based on what I have laid out in the bracket right now, would have Texas versus Oregon. And I think Oregon has had a great year. They are very experienced. Dan Lanning's a great coach, but I think the experience of Texas is going to prevail in this one. I know for sure this one would be a neutral site game. And looking at Texas, the fact that they were in the playoff last year, right, and just their experience. They've got the quarterback that's been there. They got a coach that's been there, and I think they're actually a team that can match up with Oregon toe to toe in terms of talent. And so because of all that, I like Texas. And then you got Boise State versus Georgia. Your classic David Goliath story here. But I think Goliath is going to win this one, unfortunately. Unfortunately for Boise, I should say. Unfortunately for David, depending on how you look at it. But I think Georgia, with just all of the talent, the athleticism, the depth that they have, especially on the front seven, which is always what they're known for, I think Georgia wins this one. They find a way to contain Ashton Genty, and they move on to the championship game, which would bring a third matchup, a third installment of the matchup of Texas versus Georgia this year, which I think is pretty rare for. I don't know how often that would actually have happened in college football history, but for a team to play each other 3 times in a season, I don't think it's happened all that many times. But it would be the third matchup of the year, and interesting because Georgia's won both of them. It's both of Texas's losses are to Georgia, and so they're, at least in the NFL, when teams do play a third time, there's a lot of like, it's very hard to beat a team 3 times in a year. So I think something I've heard recently of like that's something people say. That's kind of a narrative thing, but I don't think the data actually supports that as much as it like might feel narratively. Just like for the record, and that's kind of why one of the reasons why I still just I don't think Texas would have the answer. I think Kirby Smart, of all the coaches in this tournament, in this bracket, is the most experienced and has kind of been there, done that. He's kind of been in these situations. He's been in different playoff formats, or maybe not in different ones, but he's been in a bracket playoff type of a format, and he's been through a lot of different situations, different scenarios, and I trust the experience of that there more, and I think Georgia would find a way to win the third time against Texas this year, and so Texas would be at that point, I think 13-3, all 3 losses being to Georgia, which would not be fun for them. But so that's what I think is going to happen. Those are my predictions for the college football playoff. I think Georgia is going to beat Texas. I think the SEC has a pretty good showing. Shocker. So, yeah, that's going to do it for the sports talk for this episode. But I do now want to get into the Christmas characters ranked. Give you the top 10. And this was difficult to rank these, I'll be honest. I mean, I have my 10 here that I think are pretty solid. And I'm going to stick with them. I'm not really sold to a lot of the, like, where they are in the rankings. I'm not dying on this hill for a lot of them. It was more just a gut thing. You know, I typed them out and put it just in a small window over here. What do I think right now in this moment? So I think this is more of just I've got these 10 characters, and they're kind of ranked, but again, I'm not going to die on the hill of where I'm putting all these. So at number 10, John McClane, because Die Hard is a Christmas movie. That's all I really have. Number 9, Frosty. Obviously, Frosty is an iconic Christmas character. He's got the song and everything. He's one of the OG Christmas characters. But what you know what, like, I don't know the right way to say this, but you know what happens when it warms up, right? When in a month or two, when or I guess in a couple months when spring shows up and the sun comes out. I mean, I think we all know what happens to Frosty then. So I can't put him too much higher up on this list, just because we know what happens when it starts to heat up a little bit outside. Sorry, Frosty. Next up, Ebenezer Scrooge. Again, pretty classic Christmas movie, or I guess character you would call it here with this one. And I mean, Scrooge is a kind of iconic character. Nothing like super flashy, I think, about him, but I think the heart of what his character experiences is cool for someone that just doesn't like Christmas. And then the whole thing he goes through to be like, oh, wait, no, yeah, Christmas is great. And there's a handful of characters like that on this list. But I think just because of he's somewhat of an icon in the Christmas character world. I'll go with Scrooge there at number 8. Number 7, I've got Ralphie. This is one I felt a little bad putting him this low, because this was kind of one of my favorite childhood movies growing up around Christmas time. Still is kind of. I mean, I still enjoy the movie, of course, and he's got a lot of great moments, a lot of quotable moments throughout the movie. But there's just a lot of good characters ahead of him. So nothing wrong with Ralphie at all. It's a great moment. Finally gets the BB gun. Sorry if you haven't seen it, but he does finally get the Red Ryder BB gun. And then he shoots his eye out, kind of. So Ralphie there at number 7. Number 6, we've got Rudolph. Again, nothing wrong with Rudolph. He's great. He's iconic. He's kind of in the same category as Frosty. Goes way back. He's got the song. Plays an important part. Kind of saves Christmas on that foggy night, you know? So he's done a lot of great things for Christmas, for the holiday, and for the kids across the world. So Santa can get the presents there, but, you know, is just other than that, nothing too like over the top fancy special about him, I guess, except maybe you could think his nose literally lights up. So maybe I'm a little off there, but I've got my list. I'm sticking to it. Rudolph is going at 6. Number 5, Clark Griswold. I think really an awesome character. Probably my favorite Christmas movie. And I think he's kind of, obviously he's like the main character of the movie. But I think on top of just the funny moments he has, it's also his heart's in such a right, like his heart is in such a good place within the movie of all he wants is the family to come together and have a great traditional Griswold family Christmas, you know? And I think that part of it is wholesome and it's enjoyable. It's fun to watch. And so for all those reasons, I've got Clark Griswold at number 5. Number 4, another instance of a guy or a character who comes to love Christmas, and he hates it at first. You probably know who I'm talking about now. It is the Grinch. Grinch is obviously another iconic Christmas character who, I mean, I think the Jim Carrey Grinch is the best Grinch. I don't think that's a debate. And that movie is awesome. Very quotable. That's one of those you can quote year round. I know I do. It is very quotable throughout the entire year. And at the same time, it's a great story of he loved Christmas. And then people took that away from him because they were mean to him. And then comes back and realizes, oh, Christmas is actually about something way more. So Grinch is a great story, great character. Grinch coming in at 4. Number 3, somebody I debated putting higher up on the list, but I think there's a slight lack of substance maybe, or of deeper meaning. But because of how funny he is, he's number 3. And it's Cousin Eddie. I think Cousin Eddie is probably the funniest of any Christmas character on the list, or any movie that you're going to find. And I mean, there's a lot of different quotes I wanted to throw in, but I'm still trying to keep this family friendly, and so there's only so many things I could have thrown in. But you know, you're probably imagining some of those quotes right now. Some things, some of the funny quotes from Cousin Eddie from the movie, and he is obviously a fan favorite. And I say he doesn't have like deeper moments. I still think, as Clark points out in one of those late scenes, he's the well-meaning cousin, right? When he goes and kidnaps the boss, Clark's boss, to the whole thing. He's very well-meaning. His heart's in the right place, and he just does a lot of. But it's really about the quotes he throws in, the funny things he says, which is why we love Cousin Eddie, and that he's there at 3. Number 2, Buddy the Elf. I went back and forth quite a bit on 1 and 2. But I did go with Buddy at number 2. Obviously, he checks all the boxes. He's funny. His heart's in the right place. He helps other people enjoy Christmas more by singing loud for all to hear. And he's got all of it. He's even tight with Santa. He knows Santa pretty well too, which is great. I think the only thing it's the unreal. Well, this might sound a little off. It's like it's clearly like more unrealistic, I think. But maybe not. Maybe a baby goes to the North Pole. I don't know. But I think that's the one area where number 1 gets a slight edge over number 2, just because of the the potential believability of it, I guess, if that makes sense. But Buddy the Elf is a hard character to top, really. He's about as good as it gets. It's more just the realistic side of things, because you know me, I'm all black and white, and I hate fun. If you know me, you know I hate fun. Which leads me to my top character, number 1, Kevin McAllister. And from Home Alone, I think it's an all-time Christmas movie. It's on the Mount Rushmore of Christmas movies, and obviously he's a character that really drives a big part of what makes the movie great. And I just remember watching as a kid, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I kind of wish I had an opportunity to just booby trap the whole house and set it up and almost feel like a battle scene, which in a way it always hypes me up. I think that's kind of what gives this the edge for number 1, of like, it just something about it hypes me up. It kind of was like, man, what a cool experience. Like he outsmarted the Wet Bandits, and he's ahead of them at every step. I mean, on top of all that, he still has the experience of being mad at his family, wanting to be away with them for Christmas, and then obviously heart change. He's like, oh wait, no, it's actually great to have him here. So the experience he has to grow, and the whole 9 yards, all of it. I do think Kevin McAllister is probably the best Christmas character, in my opinion. And I also love his quote at the beginning when he says, "When I grow up and get married, I'm living alone." And I felt that. I felt I can relate to that, not to the married part, but to the living alone part. I've got that box checked, and so I'm like, man, Kevin's speaking to me. Kevin is speaking to me there. So that's the list. Again, I said this before, but I'll say it again. I'm really not married to where these people are in this list. I'm happy to discuss and maybe move some people up, move some people down. But I think even if the ranking isn't totally right where it should be, I do think I have the right list of people in here. So there is your Christmas character list, your top 10 Christmas characters from me. And that's going to do it for this episode. And we'll wrap it up with the office quote of the week, coming from Michael, which is one of my favorites. It says, it is Christmas related, as Christmas is a week from today. If you haven't caught on the theme by now, I'm not quite sure what to tell you, but the quote is, "Presents are the best way to show someone how much you care. It's like a tangible thing that you can point to and say, hey man, I love you this many dollars worth." And I think that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful thing, that when you don't know how to say it, you can show them. You show them the receipt and say, this is how much I love you. And you show them the receipt. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Right. So shout out to Michael. Shout out to The Office. Shout out to Christmas. And shout out to Jesus. Because that's ultimately, that's the whole reason we have the season anyway. Am I right? So shout out to Jesus for being born. And yeah, shout out to Christmas coming up, week away. It's exciting. All that being said, I don't know what the podcast schedule is going to look like over the next few weeks. Like, I'm probably not going to record an episode on Christmas Day, I would imagine. But I might have some other one-off things here or there. I'll probably keep the Instagram, flowing a little bit, which if I hadn't mentioned before, I do have now an Instagram for this page that I'll start to post more clips on. And so if you're not able to listen to whole episodes, you can kind of get snippets of some things that I'm talking about here and there that'll be on the Instagram. I'll probably have more of those posted over the next couple of weeks in case I don't have any full-length episodes. But like I said, I will have the clips. You can see them on Instagram, and we'll probably be on YouTube now as well. So that'll all be available here moving forward, which I think is pretty exciting. And so check those out if you want to see some clips. Give me a follow, like and subscribe, all those things. Help me build the algorithm and get the word out there, because I think more people need to hear what I have to say. I mentioned that on the little test video I did earlier this week. But I think I have some good sports opinions that people need to hear. I think more people need to hear it. So just help me out. Share it, like it, comment on it, do whatever helps the algorithm. I still don't know how it works, but it is what it is. So that's my little pitch to you. Like and subscribe. I'm there now. Here we are. So all that being said, thank you for listening. I do appreciate you tuning in. Let me know what you think of my list. Anybody too high? Anybody too low? Who do you think is going to win the college football playoff? Do you think Travis Hunter deserved the Heisman? And then, do you think Mahomes should play? What should the Chiefs, how should they approach the next couple of weeks to find a way to get the 1 seed, but also, get healthy again, but not take off a whole month? What do you think they should do to balance that out? So let me know. Let me know in the comments, or just text me, because I'd love to hear it. So that is going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. And as always, go Chiefs.